The fluorescent hum of Langley & Holt's 27th floor sales bullpen had always sounded like the heartbeat of my ambition, a relentless whir that mixed with keyboard clatter and the faint hiss of cappuccino machines from the kitchenette. For 7 years, I inhaled that noise like oxygen, built an iron-veined routine around it, let it etch itself into the marrow of my days even when exhaustion frayed the edges of my patience. I told myself the grind was worth it. Every cold call, every marathon negotiation, every red-eye flight to woo a fickle client in Oslo or Austin or Belfast. I told myself to hold on until the first Friday of April, bonus day, because that payout would finally fund the small coastal house I'd circled on my vision board with a thick, hopeful line of gold ink. I told myself I could endure anything for one more week. But on a grim Monday that smelled of stale rain and paper dust, my boss, Trevor Langley, heir apparent and tyrant inheritor of a name carved into the company's lobby wall, summoned me into the glass-walled conference cube they called the aquarium. The hallway leading there felt longer than I ever remembered, a sterile gauntlet of framed sales awards gleaming like medals on a soulless breastplate. My colleagues' eyes flicked up from spreadsheets and CRM dashboards as I passed. Some offered sympathetic half-smiles, as though they sensed the kill in the air, the slick metallic scent of corporate bloodletting. Trevor waited inside, hands clasped behind his back, posture erect, like a man rehearsing an acceptance speech. His tailored charcoal suit was so crisp, it looked starched in cruelty. Behind him the skyline of London unfurled in misty tears, the Thames a pewter ribbon threading between ink-smudged buildings. I loved that view once. Today it looked like a funeral backdrop. He gestured to the chair opposite. "Marina, sit." I did, smoothing a palm over my navy pencil skirt. My pulse drummed at the base of my throat. Trevor's eyes were Arctic blue, a color that never warmed even when he smiled. He did not smile now. "I'll dispense with pleasantries," he said, voice as precise as a scalpel. "Your numbers this quarter were fine. But fine isn't good enough in a market this volatile. The board expects decisive action, especially with overhead ballooning. Regrettably, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. HR has prepared a severance package you'll find generous." Severance. Eliminated. The words floated like ash in the silence that followed. For a heartbeat, my brain refused to fit them together with my life. I had landed the Oslo contract single-handedly last month, had salvaged the Austin disaster, when legal threatened to implode the deal. I was top 5 in revenue every quarter for 3 straight years. He couldn't mean this. But he did. His posture, the HR envelope on the table, the clockwork finality, all confirmed it. I swallowed. Overhead? Trevor, I bill more than double my salary. And the Oslo pipeline alone. He raised a hand, irritation flickering. The decision's final. Final. The word rang like a gavel. I inhaled again, slower, deeper, letting oxygen sharpen thought. Trevor thought he knew my worth. He had no idea. Not about the phantom shares, accumulated through a silent partner agreement signed before he became CEO. Not about the escrow account that made me, legally, owner of 48% of voting stock, hidden beneath a trust structure efficient enough to escape even Langley's paranoid audits. The agreement stipulated disclosure only if I saw fit. And I had waited. Bided time, kept my name off the marquee because influence moved smoother when cloaked. 7 years ago, when I joined Land H as an entry-level representative with 2 suitcases and a Cambridge finance degree, the company coffers were shallow and treacherous. Holt, founder and majority stakeholder, needed cash after a rogue subsidiary bled red under currency speculation losses. I bought in quietly through Holt's shell vehicle, my inheritance from my late granddad's Cornish distillery fortune, leveraged to keep Land H afloat. Trevor's father never learned my name. He only saw the money and signed. Then he groomed Trevor, a golden boy sharpened on entitlement and quarterly targets. Now the boy was firing me. "Trevor," I began, letting my gaze settle on him the way a surgeon studies the incision site. "I understand the board's concern, but perhaps we should discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," he snapped, veneer cracking. Security will escort you to collect personal items. My phone buzzed against my palm, a text from HR with meeting details. Efficient execution. That was Trevor's hallmark. I stood. A calmness spread through me, almost narcotic. Very well, but before I leave, you should know something. He arched a brow. You're not in a position to threaten. No threat, I corrected, voice soft as velvet. Just an overdue introduction. Quote, I turned toward the door without elaboration. Let him stew, let curiosity gnaw at him like acid on steel. Outside, colleagues pretended not to stare as I returned to my desk. I powered down my workstation methodically, ejecting the encrypted USB token I always kept in the USB-C dock. Inside lay meticulous backups, revenue projections, and, most important, minutes from the pre-IPO shareholder agreement tying Trevor's future to mine. Ed, grizzled account exec, who once joked I could outsell the devil, hovered by the coffee carafe. You, all right, Rena? I managed to smile. Ask me tomorrow. Ed blew out a breath. Saw him march Cooper out last month. Didn't think he'd touch you, bastard. His empathy warmed me, but I couldn't indulge. Save me a donut in the break room, will you? He nodded, confusion knitting his brows. Security arrived. 2 polite professionals in black polo shirts bearing the Land H crest. They offered me a cardboard banker's box. I placed inside a framed photo of Mum and Granddad toasting my Cambridge graduation, the pewter fountain pen Holt had gifted me for closing our first £1 million deal, and a tiny succulent that thrived despite my neglect. When I lifted the pen last, I remembered Holt's words, build something that outlives the ink. I intended to. Escorted to the elevator, I ignored Trevor's reflection in the mirrored doors as they slid shut. He watched from the corridor, arms folded, expression unreadable. Perhaps he expected tears. I gifted him none. On the ground floor, I paused by reception, heart hammering with purpose. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Holt's personal mobile on his Scottish estate. 3 rings. Marina! Thought you'd forgotten an old sailor, he greeted, voice still rich with warm whiskey notes. I could never. Listen, I'm invoking the contingency clause. Silence stretched. Then, Trevor fire you? Yes. A hiss. Then Laddie's bubbled over. What do you need? Board meeting. 48 hours. He chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. I'll notify legal. Raise the flag, lass. I ended the call, cold adrenaline flushing every vein. Outside, the London drizzle intensified, smearing the marble steps in silver tears. I didn't go home. Instead, I crossed the Thames by cab to a Georgian townhouse in Battersea, a property registered to Meridia Nominees Limited, itself owned by a trust whose beneficiary was simply MC. Inside, fences of server racks hummed in conditioned air, the nerve center of my secret life. Here I ran analytic scripts on market data, coded risk models, and tracked Land H's value swings in real time. Here I weaponized information long before Trevor learned to tie a Windsor knot. I logged in. Keys clacked like eager conspirators. Equity, £312.7 million. Voting share, 48%. Clauses. Right to call extraordinary general meeting with 48-hour notice upon executive misconduct endangering shareholder value. Firing top producer within 1 week of annual bonus triggered that clause, a landmine Trevor never saw in the legal labyrinth. I composed a concise, lethal notice invoking the meeting, ceasing Holt, external counsel, and the board's independent chair, Dame Rosamund Keane. I attached evidence, my sales figures, the severance memo citing overhead, and a financial analysis quantifying lost revenue. I requested the meeting for Wednesday 9 a.m., 47 hours from now. When I hit send, a calm full of storms settled inside me. Tuesday blurred in preparation. I spent dawn to dusk assembling a presentation, mapping out a restructuring that would dethrone Trevor and install interim leadership until the annual vote. For optics, I planned to recommend Ed, whom the floor trusted, as acting head of sales. If Ed accepted, morale would rally. Investors craved stability, not tantrums. Just after twilight, I bought a navy power suit, sleek, understated, armor cut from confidence, and laid it across a leather chaise in my flat overlooking Hyde Park. The park lamps glowed like pearls strung along serpentine paths. I wondered if Trevor slept under those same lights tonight, or if anxiety clawed him awake in his penthouse. I hoped for the latter. Yet amid my plotted vengeance, something unexpected flickered. Freedom, not just from Trevor, but from the shackles of waiting. For years, I let the company step over my ambition because secrecy insulated me. Now reveal was inevitable. My pulse quickened. Was it fear or elation? Maybe both. I'd soon stand exposed, not merely as top saleswoman but as co-owner. Could my colleagues ever see me the same? Did it matter? I envisaged their faces when I walked into that boardroom. Shock. Maybe betrayal. Maybe pride. Uncertainty rippled through me, but I rode it like a seasoned surfer tames the unrelenting sea. Wednesday dawned, tungsten gray, drizzle stippling my townhouse windows. I dressed in the navy suit, pinned my grandfather's antique jade brooch on the lapel, an emerald spear of conviction. In the mirror, my green eyes looked brighter than usual, lit by irrevocable determination. A black cab ferried me to Land H's Canary Wharf Tower. Security at the lobby scanned my visitor pass, brows rising when the system flagged VIP clearance they didn't know existed. I stepped into the executive elevator reserved for C-suite, used my biometric code, another gem in Holt's contingency, and felt the car ascend like a cannon shell. On the 33rd floor, wood-paneled corridors replaced open cubicles. Oil portraits of past directors lined the walls, stern men, and the occasional steel-eyed woman. At the far end, the boardroom door loomed, oak slabs carved with Land H's crest. Trevor waited outside, jaw tight, his tie skewed as though hastily knotted. "What are you doing here? This is a private session." "It's an extraordinary general meeting," I corrected, handing him a printed agenda. "Called under Clause 12.4. He scanned, color draining. This is absurd." My smile was razor soft. Absurdity is firing your lead rainmaker before bonus week. The door opened from within. Dame Rosamond, hair silver as moonlit frost, beckoned. "Let's proceed." We entered. 10 directors formed a semicircle around a walnut table. Slender microphones glinted like surgical tools. A screen behind the chair awaited presentation. I placed my laptop on the table, connected the HDMI cable. Trevor remained standing. Sweat purled at his temple. Dame Rosamond cleared her throat. "Ms. Caldwell, as convener, you have the floor." I inhaled, gaze sweeping the room of power brokers whose decisions shaped fortunes. Then I began. "Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time on short notice. Today I wish to address actions that jeopardize shareholder value and company stability. In the packets before you, you will find documentation of my employment termination executed by Mr. Langley on Monday, citing overhead." Trevor slammed a palm on the table. She was underperforming. Despite achieving a revenue surplus of £12.8 million year to date. My voice cut through his protest like filament wire. More importantly, termination occurred 1 week before contractual bonus disbursement. This violates retention policies designed to protect high-performing staff and risks litigation. Quote, I clicked slide 1, a chart of revenue by rep, my name towering above the rest. Silence, except the projector fan. Trevor's jaw flexed. Slide 2, financial impact of my current pipeline. Oslo contract alone projected $6 million net profit. Slide 3, legal liability matrix from wrongful termination suits, referencing precedent in European labor courts. Rosamond's brow furrowed. Trevor, were you aware? He swallowed. Her attitude eroded team cohesion. I almost laughed. If winning deals erodes cohesion, perhaps we should all underperform, yes? A few directors shifted, uncomfortable. Slide 4, my ownership disclosure. 48% common voting shares held via Meridia Trust. Gasps ripple. Trevor's face drained wax white. "Yes," I said softly. "I'm a shareholder of nearly half the company. I invested in Land H during its darkest hour because I believed in its potential. I chose to work incognito to understand operations from the ground up. That journey ends today." I closed the laptop. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Mr. Langley's leadership and propose interim co-executive directors until the annual election. Additionally, I request reinstatement of my employment with full-back compensation, though I may choose to transition to strategic roles. Trevor stepped forward, voice trembling. "This is madness. She's manipulating." Rosamond raised a hand. "We will deliberate." She nodded toward the adjoining lounge. Trevor and I were dismissed while the board debated. In the corridor, he spun on me. "You think you're clever. You blindsided me." "Trevor," I replied, tone gentle as winter dusk, "on Monday you burned a bridge you didn't know I built." His lips parted, no retort. Minutes crawled like hours. My heart thrummed, but my face remained placid. At length the door opened. Rosamond summoned us in. We stood before the table, as defendants waiting on a verdict. Her expression revealed nothing. "After careful consideration," she began, "the board." A piercing alarm klaxon shrieked through the floor, drowning her words and flooding red emergency lights across the ceiling. The building's PA crackled. "Security breach on executive level. Initiate lockdown." Directors jerked to their feet. Trevor's eyes widened. Rosamond half rose, frowns slicing deeper. I froze, mind racing. Lockdown? Here? Now? My muscles primed as adrenaline surged, every nerve lit like copper wire. Then someone banged on the boardroom door from the corridor. Heavy, frantic, a shout muffled by thick oak. "Let me in! They've got guns!" Chaos erupted. The door handles rattled. The boards scattered, some ducking beneath table edges, others fumbling for phones. Trevor stared at me, terror stark and childlike. And I realized, in one blistering heartbeat, that my battle for control might be the least of our problems, that something far darker had just invaded Langley and Holt, and all my meticulous plans were about to collide with a threat no contingency clause could civilize. Before I could reach the door, a gunshot cracked, wood splintered, and a stray bullet buried itself in the plaster near the portrait of Founder Langley Sr., raining dust like archaic judgment. My pulse thundered, the klaxon howled. Somewhere outside, footsteps pounded closer. I pivoted toward Trevor, who was backing away in shock. "Find cover," I commanded. He obeyed without argument. My eyes swept the room for anything I could wield or barricade. Heavy crystal decanters, a brass coat stand. Not enough. The door shuddered again under a second impact. And in that instant, standing between terrified directors and an unknown armed force, I understood that ownership meant more than shares or votes. It meant responsibility to protect the people who never saw this coming, including the man who just ended my career. Another gunshot. Boards split. Dust choked the air. I clenched the jade brooch at my lapel like a talisman and stepped forward, mind calculating risks and routes. Every instinct screaming, but one truth ringing clearer than the klaxon. I would not let Trevor Langley, or any soul in this room, fall today. The door cracked wider. I inhaled once and moved. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." I pushed my chair back and stood, letting the ripple of confused glances wash over me. My palms were slick inside my tailored leather gloves. It was October, and New York's wind had turned sharp, biting my ears as I walked the block from Grand Central to Langley and Holt every morning. But today, the chill felt different. It was the cold realization that everything I'd built might dissolve like late September mist. "Nicole," Ethan Carlisle called after me, voice clipped. He was the junior partner I'd mentored during orientation season. The one with ivory white sneakers that squeaked against the marble. He caught up at the elevator doors. They're saying you..." His words trailed as I slid onto the express car, barely waiting to ask more. I nodded, leaning against the mirrored wall. The doors hissed closed above our heads, and I studied my reflection. dark hair cut in an angled bob, eyes wide set and sharp, shoulders squared against the mirror's vertical seam. 7 years in tech sales had taught me to keep my face blank, my chest steady, but inside, the engine of my mind roared. Below on the 27th floor, the hum of the bullpen now felt like static, the electricity that had kept me alive flickering out. I had been told only a day ago that my quarterly bonus, 6 figures, was locked in. The numbers had spiked, a quarter that exceeded projections, new contracts signed with a military contractor, my personal touch convincing board members to double down. It should have meant champagne in the conference room and pats on the back. Instead, this morning's email from Harold 5 o'clock Shadow Montgomery, who'd been acting CEO since Penelope Holt's sudden retirement, had landed in my inbox with subject line, urgent, employment status. I'd clicked it in my car, heart fluttering. 2 sentences. Effective immediately, your employment with Langley & Holt has been terminated. Retrieve personal items by close of business. Contact HR with questions. No signature, no thank you, no acknowledgement of my contributions. The elevator dinged at the lobby, and I stepped out into the midday swirl. I crossed Vanderbilt Avenue faster than usual, careful not to let anyone block my view. If they saw me falter, they'd pounce. Gossipers, opportunists, the ones waiting to replace me. I ducked into my favorite cafe, Half Moon Brew, whose windows looked out onto Park Avenue South. The barista, Marisol, greeted me by name. I nodded, forcing a smile, and ordered a decaf Americano. No room, black. She slid it across the counter, her brow knit with concern. Rough day? She asked, tapping the cup. Just shifting markets, I said, trying for lightness. You okay? She pressed. Fine, I told her. Thanks. Then I gathered my courage and left a $20 tip. As I walked back outside, steaming cup in hand, I looked up. The Langley & Holt building arched high above the canopy of autumn leaves, grand as a bank vault. That was my world, my bastion, and now I was locked out. I drank with measured sips, letting the hot liquid anchor me. My phone vibrated, an unknown number. Nicole Grant? It was Mira Lawson, my estate attorney. I had met her twice last year to finalize a side agreement, a quiet stock transfer that no one else even knew existed. My heart lurched. I need to see you today, she said. It's about the company. My grip tightened on the cup, cracking the ceramic rim. The metallic taste of fear mingled with the coffee. All right, I replied. Meet me at my place in an hour. I ended the call, set my jaw, and started walking north. Brownstone after brownstone blurred past. In the hyper-focused lens of my panic, I replayed the minutes of last night's board meeting, Harold's drone of financials, my slide deck glowing on the projector. Then the announcement, a strategic reorganization, cost-cutting measures, elimination of my position. I remembered the way his eyes skimmed right past me during the Quandé, as if I were dust on the podium. My mind raced. They'd fired me to save the payout. But what they didn't know was my other stake, my hidden lever. At 32, I'd spent my 20s clawing up the ranks. Born into a modest family in Ohio, I'd won scholarships and hustled through internships. I'd met Robert Langley at a conference. He was still a titan then, unbreakable but generous, mentoring young talent. Over 4 years, I'd accrued stock options, small at first, then vested shares when the company went public. I'd never flaunted them. I'd seen Penelope Holt, daughter of one of the founders, whisper about me in offices, calling me the silent shark. I'd let them think I was just another senior rep. But last year, after I closed the biggest defense contract in the firm's history, I quietly converted half of my 401k into a private purchase of shares, courtesy of a back-channel deal my father suggested. He was a financial planner who taught me to invest wisely. I signed the paperwork under an LLC, Grant Capital Holdings, so no one would connect the dots. I was careful. Now, outside my apartment building, I wiped foam from my lip and steeled myself. Mira would tell me whether the shares had cleared. If they had, I'd own, literally, half of Langley & Holt, and this morning's pink slip would soon feel like a faint echo compared to the reverberation I was about to unleash. I climbed the stoop, inserted my key, and stepped into the quiet foyer. The walls were lined with prints of New York icons: Lady Liberty, Brooklyn Bridge, Times Square at dusk, a map of possibility. I dropped my bag by the door, flicked on the hallway lamp, and headed to the guest room where Mira waited. She looked up from a mahogany desk stacked with folders, spectacles perched on her nose. Her expression was grave. "You're not going to like this," she said. My pulse spiked. I perched on the edge of the leather chair, coffee cup trembling. "They cleared by midnight," she said softly, tapping the folder labeled Grant Cap. Grant Capital Holdings now holds 49.6% voting shares. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. 49.6%, just under half. Enough to block decisions, but not enough to command a loan. "What about voting control?" I asked, voice low. "They need only 2% more to remove you as a voting minority." A cold rage rose in me. They'd thought to sideline me, but I'd been playing a deeper hand. They believed I was powerless. "Okay," I whispered. "Then let's finish the work on my proxy." Mira nodded, sliding a pen across the folder toward me. "We need your signature on this counter-proxy agreement. We'll call an emergency shareholder meeting." My fingers closed over the pen. The words on the page blurred. LLC, voting shares, special resolution. I signed. As the ink dried, I felt something shift, a pivot in the axis of my life. I stood, feeling the room spin for a second. This was it, the moment I took back my power. But before I could tell Mira my next move, my phone buzzed again. A text from Harold. "Board meeting in 1 hour. All current members must attend. Dress code, business formal." I stared at the message. He wanted to flaunt his authority, I was sure. To parade the old guard around, a show of unity after he'd removed me. I rose, smoothing my jacket. "Get the coffee pot ready," I told Mira. "It's going to be a long day." I closed the folder, slipped it into my bag, and walked to the front door. Outside, the city roared, indifferent. But I wasn't indifferent. I was alive. The boardroom was on the 28th floor, one above my old domain. As I stepped off the elevator, the glass corridor dripped with corporate art. Abstract canvases, zinc sculptures, polished chrome. I paused, inhaling deeply, thinking of every late night, each call to clients, every bit of sweat and strategy I'd poured into this building. It was my home. And soon, it would be my kingdom. I pressed the conference room button and entered. And that's when I saw the look on Harold's face, like a man who just realized the tide was turning but had no idea how to swim. Harold's eyes flickered as I stepped into the boardroom, each footfall echoing like a challenge against the polished marble. He raised a stiff hand in greeting, though it trembled ever so slightly, perhaps from surprise, perhaps from something darker. I closed the conference door behind me, the click sounding like the latch on a trap. "Nicole," he began, voice smooth but strained. "Glad you could join us at such short notice." Around the long mahogany table, the other board members, 5 in total, sat in their high-backed chairs. Mr. Chang with his small, calculating smile. Lydia Perez, arms folded, gaze clipped. Jonathan Veers, fiddling with his tie. And Claire Holt Wilkins, who had inherited half of Penelope's shares and sat with an inscrutable mask. I removed my coat and draped it over the back of the nearest chair, then took a measured breath. I let them observe, hair glossy, suit tailored, eyes radiating a calm that contrasted the tension in the room. I ran a finger along the polished edge of the table and said, "Thank you for convening this meeting. Let's begin." Harold cleared his throat. "As you're all aware, today's agenda covers the sudden departure of our former Director of Strategic Accounts, Ms. Grant. We will also discuss the interim redistribution of her divisions and the projected impact on Q4. His hands fluttered over a stack of printed slides. I tapped the folder at my side, the one holding the counter-proxy documents. I slid it forward so it aligned with Claire's nameplate. The paper clicked against the wood like a gauntlet dropped. Every head turned. Silence spread. "Before we dive into the projections," I said, voice steady, "I'd like to address the first item." I paused, letting the gravity settle, then continued. My termination this morning was, as the HR memo stated, effective immediately. Yet here I am. That's because my status has changed in the past 12 hours. I opened the folder and withdrew the signed proxy agreement. Grant Capital Holdings now holds 49.6% of voting shares in Langley and Holt. A collective gasp followed, and the tension ratcheted upward. Mr. Chang's jaw tightened. Jonathan's tie fell loose around his collar. Lydia's posture straightened, eyes narrowing. Harold's face flushed as color drained from his cheeks. I let them breathe it in, the magnitude. Which means, I said softly, that any resolution to remove me, to reduce my stake, or to redistribute the shares without my approval is invalid under current corporate governance. I tapped the proxy. I have the power to call or block any motion. Lydia's fist tapped against the tabletop. This is preposterous. You can't just spring this on us. Oh, but I can, I cut in, because I anticipated being sidelined. That's why I took the precautionary steps last quarter. That's why I signed these papers in my home with full notarization. I looked each of them in the eyes. Langley & Holt isn't just the company that employed me. It's the company I helped build, that I invested in. Literally, I own nearly half of it now, and I intend to see it thrive. Harold's voice cracked. Are you threatening us? I leaned forward, hands splayed on the table. I'm reminding everyone here that your decisions affect all stakeholders. You'll find I'm perfectly willing to exercise every right I have to protect this firm's future, and my own. Silence slammed the room. Claire cleared her throat, adjusting her glasses. Perhaps we should move to a closed caucus, she suggested, tone neutral. I smiled, a measured arc that didn't reach my eyes. No need. Let's address the real reason you called this meeting. I gestured to the slides that Harold fumbled to open. The first slide showed Q3 revenues, but with glaring red arrows forecasting shortfalls if key clients shifted allegiances after my departure. These projections, I said, are without my accounts, but we both know those clients trust me personally. I have calls scheduled this afternoon. Lydia's lips parted. You're betting, what, that they'll follow you? I'm betting on relationships, I responded. Something you can't quantify in pie charts. Jonathan exhaled. Then what exactly do you want, Nicole? I settled back, folding my hands. I want the board to retract my termination, reinstate my role as Director of Strategic Accounts, and approve a new contract reflecting my expanded ownership stake. I also want Penelope's seat. A ripple of shock pulsed through the table. Harold's knuckles whitened around his pen. I want Claire's seat, I said, cutting Claire's proposal short. Her throat bobbed. 4 board seats plus controlling influence over all strategic contracts. The room froze under my ultimatum. I let the moment linger. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to this corporate storm. Inside, I held the fulcrum. And I wasn't done yet. I watched Claire's face as she fought to mask indignation. The air in the boardroom crackled, every charged molecule waiting for an explosion. But I had no interest in destruction. I wanted renewal. I took a deep breath, letting the silence do its work, then continued. Let's be clear, I said, voice low but resolute. I'm not here to dismantle Langley & Holt. I'm here to fortify it. But that requires leadership that respects both operational expertise and shareholder value. I've proven my worth in client halls and on balance sheets. Now I intend to prove it at the helm. Harold swallowed. His mouth opened, then shut. Mr. Chang shifted in his seat, fingers drumming. Lydia and Jonathan exchanged glances. Claire's mask faltered. Her eyebrows lifted in shock. It's either that, I added, or I call an independent audit of the recent share transfer and bring in a proxy advisory firm. We can involve the SEC if necessary. Penelope's retirement left a vacuum. I'm offering to fill it, but on my terms. Claire blinked. You'd risk regulatory scrutiny? I'd risk nothing more than your confidence. I retrieved a slim binder from the folder, market analyses, client letters, vote commitments from 2 other minor shareholders. Here, you'll find letters from Green Tech Defense, Meridian Holdings, and ArgoNav Inc., all vouching for my leadership. I let the binder slide across to Claire, then turned my gaze to Lydia. Ms. Perez, Your seat as audit chair will be open if you choose to stay." Lydia's jaw clenched, but she remained silent. "You want a timeline?" I said, pacing slowly along the length of the table. "By end of business this Friday, we'll formalize my contract and elect me to the board. Until then, any action without my concurrence is moot. After Friday, I assume full responsibilities." I stopped, facing them. "That gives you 4 days to decide. Support the future or be swept aside by it." Jonathan leaned forward. "And if we disagree?" "Then we face a shareholder vote," I replied evenly, "and I have the numbers." I tapped my phone, then tossed it onto the table with a subtle flourish. "Ask Mira for a breakdown." Claire looked at Harold for guidance, but he sat frozen, as if turning to her for permission. When none came, she let out a terse breath. "Very well," she said, voice tight. "Let's adjourn for caucus." Quote. As they filed out, I remained seated, mind racing ahead. I pictured the next 4 days. Phone calls, boardroom visits, investor briefings. I had to secure Claire's reluctant endorsement, placate Mr. Cheng's risk aversion, and calm Lydia's audit concerns. Each would require a tailored approach. But I was ready. I gathered my documents into the folder and slipped it under my arm. Outside the boardroom, I bumped into Jonathan. "Nicole," he said, voice low, "be careful." "I always am," I replied with a tight smile. He nodded. "Board politics can be nastier than client negotiations." I thanked him and kept moving. In the hallway, I punched in my assistant's number. "Elise, clear my schedule for the next 3 days. Also, set up meetings with Claire Holt-Wilkins, Mr. Cheng, and Lydia Perez, individually." Within half an hour, I had Claire's assistant on the line confirming a one-on-one for this afternoon in Holt-Wilkins' private office, Cheng's team in the trading floor conference suite, and Lydia in the audit cubicle. I took a moment to breathe, then called Mira. "Status?" I asked when she answered. "Proxy advisory firms have flagged the share transfer but haven't yet issued opinions. Your letters look strong. If you meet them directly, we should sway at least one of the smaller shareholders." "Good. Keep monitoring. Prepare to file my motion at the 5th business hour on Friday." She acknowledged, and I hung up. My heart pounded with adrenaline, but my expression stayed calm. I crossed the corridor to my old office, a strategic accounts nook now empty, a glossy nameplate removed. I entered, tracing my fingertips along the polished desk. The emptiness felt like a stage before the curtain rose. I sat, opened my laptop, and began drafting my memo, how I would steer Q4 with my reinstatement. Then I moved to my phone, texting the Green Tech CEO, Frank, "Let's talk strategy at 4 p.m. Then to Meridian's CFO, Maria, "We need to finalize that proposal by tomorrow morning." My phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire's assistant. "Ms. Holt-Wilkins requests you arrive by 2 p.m. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 a.m. Plenty of time. I closed my eyes, imagining the encounter. The room's high windows. The muted view of the East River. Claire across an imposing desk. She'd test me, probe my motives, question my past choices. I'd counter with vision, competence, and purpose. I'd demonstrate that Langley and Holt needed me alive and in control. I stood, smoothing my jacket, and left the office. As I walked to Claire's suite, my phone pinged again. It was Lydia. "Nicole, any chance you can meet earlier? Between 12 and 1? I tapped back. "Absolutely. Send location." Then Mr. Cheng, "We'll need your full financials before we talk. Are you okay to share your ledgers?" I replied, "I'll send right away." And Jonathan, "Be safe today." I pocketed the phone and walked with purpose. At the end of the hall, Claire's polished bronze door loomed. I sighed, steadied myself, then knocked once. "Come in," her voice said. I opened the door and stepped into the next phase of the battle. The polished bronze of Claire Holt-Wilkins' door felt cool under my fingertips when I knocked again, this time with deliberate calm. She stood behind her massive oak desk as I entered, the afternoon light through floor-to-ceiling windows glinting on the East River beyond. As I approached, I noticed the tread of her Prada loafers tapping impatiently against the Persian rug. "Nicole," she said, voice even. She touched a thin gold chain at her throat, her fingers betraying a slight tremor. "Have a seat." I slid into the chair across from her, setting my folder on the desk. "Thank you for seeing me," I began, scanning her expression. Claire had always been the most politically savvy of the board. Her marriage to Penelope's cousin gave her familial weight, and her decades in finance held her views fiercely conservative. "I'll cut to the chase," I said, leaning forward. "You and I both know why I'm here. You hold 15.3%, enough to tip the scales. I need your support, woman to woman. We're both outsiders. I came from sales floors. You rose through finance trenches." Her lips parted slightly. "I don't appreciate being called an outsider." I held her gaze. "Then consider this. Nobody loves Langley & Holt more than I do. I've poured my life into it." She nodded slowly. "Why now? Why seize control after all these years?" I paused, feeling the weight of truth. "Because today, I got fired, and they thought I'd vanish. But I'm still here, stronger than before." Claire studied me for a long moment, then reached for a crystal decanter at her side. She poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward me. "Water?" "Thank you." I took a sip before continuing. "Look at these numbers," I said, tapping the folder where I'd arranged quarterly results and projections. "With my reinstatement and fresh leadership, we can push Q4 above target by 20%. I have the clients ready." Her gaze shifted to the folder, then back to me. "Your numbers are impressive," she admitted. "But this isn't just about profit margins." I nodded. "You're right. It's about culture, morale, and vision. They undervalued the human element. The relationships I forged. They see me as dispensable. You know better." Claire inhaled, fingers tapping the desk. "If I back you, I risk my reputation with the legacy shareholders." "Then let me protect them," I said. "I'll ensure transparent governance. We'll appoint a compliance officer you trust. Lydia Perez. She's cautious but fair, and Mr. Chang wants robust risk controls. We can structure committees to balance expertise." Claire pursed her lips. "You've thought this through." I smiled slightly. "I had to." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then set it down. "All right," she said, exhaling. "I'll vote for your reinstatement. But if you call that meeting and I look foolish, I'll—" I held up a hand. "You won't. I promise you. I'll deliver and then some." She nodded, scribbled her initials on the proxy form, and slid it across. My skin prickled with triumph as I pocketed the form. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet," she cautioned. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe." Now back to the story. My surprise flickered before I laughed softly. "I'll make sure the next chapter is worth it." As I left her office, proxy in hand, the corridors seemed brighter. 1 down, 2 to go. Next, I headed to Mr. Chang's domain, the trading floor conference suite, where screens flickered with live data. Chang was already waiting, sharp suit, even sharper glare. "Nicole," he said, extending a hand, "let's talk." I laid out risk assessments and control frameworks, each slide cutting through his skepticism. He grilled me on every projection, every contingency plan. But as the clock ticked on, his objections softened. By the time I slid the proxy across, his name 3 lines from the bottom, he nodded. "I'll support you," he said quietly. 1 seat left, Lydia Perez, audit chair. I met her in a quieter cubicle lined with binders. "You have bold plans," she said, flipping through my compliance proposals. "I planned for every angle," I said. She scrutinized my ledger, then paused. "Your financials check out, but what about transparency? This takeover feels abrupt." I leaned in. "I'll implement quarterly stakeholder forums, public minutes, no more backstage politics." She closed the binder. "Fine, you have my vote." Back in my apartment that evening, I spread the 4 signed proxies on the dining table. Claire, Chang, Lydia, plus the 2 minor shareholders who'd committed earlier. With those, I controlled 51.5%. A slim majority, but enough. I called Mira. "We're set. Schedule the meeting." She replied, "Friday at 10. I hung up and exhaled, feeling a storm dissipate. But this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, I'd cement my victory. And then I'd claim my rightful place. I woke before dawn, the pull of adrenaline stronger than my usual pre-meeting anxiety. The city outside my window was still draped in pre-dawn hush, streetlights scattering pools of gold across the pavement, taxicabs idling like mechanical beasts waiting for prey. I lay in bed for a moment, letting the silence settle in my chest, then rolled out and crossed to the kitchen. Coffee was first. Black, no sugar, the way I liked it when I needed my mind razor sharp. I pressed the French press and measured the grounds with clinical precision. As the aroma climbed, I reviewed my notes on the dining room table. The board agenda, my contingency slides, the final counterproxy signed by all 5 key shareholders. Each sheet represented hours of work, countless phone calls, strategic arguments pitched across late-night calls and weekend dinners. Yet now, or never. I dressed in a charcoal gray suit, tailored to hug my frame without constriction. Underneath, a crisp white blouse with a subtle pinstripe detailed my professional edge. My hair was tied back in a neat chignon, a style I reserved for high-stakes days. I applied minimal makeup, a sweep of concealer, a hint of mascara, and a neutral lip that wouldn't smear. I checked myself in the mirror. Determination lined my eyes, and I knew they'd see it in the boardroom too. At 7:15 a.m., I texted Elise. "I'm heading into the office. See you there at 8. Within seconds, her reply pinged. "Running the AV and coffee. Don't worry, you've got this." Her confidence steadied me. I left my apartment, crossing the street to the subway entrance. Even on a Friday morning, the 7 train was relatively empty, a bonus I'd arranged by taking an earlier schedule. I leaned against the window and closed my eyes, repeating my opening lines. "Thank you all for convening on such short notice. Our future depends on this moment." The rhythm of the train wheels beneath me became a metronome, marking each mental rehearsal. At 8 a.m., I stepped off at Grand Central and descended to the street. The crisp air bit at my cheeks as I walked the familiar route to Langley and Holt. The building's monolithic glass facade reflected the pale morning light. I inhaled deeply and entered the lobby, offering my key fob to the security guard, who nodded in recognition. My name tag, Nicole Grant, Director of Strategic Accounts, hung around my neck, a small victory in itself. Elise met me at the elevator bank, her smile warm but urgent. "AV's set. Board is arriving soon." She pointed to the digital directory. "Board meeting, 10 a.m., conference room 2801. I nodded and stepped into the express elevator, pressing 28. The doors closed with a soft whoosh. Inside, I reviewed my slides on the tablet I held. Slide 1, Executive Summary and Goals. Slide 2, Proxy Acquisition Recap. Slide 3, Q4 Client Pipeline. Beneath each header lay succinct bullet points, just enough to guide my speech, not distract from it. The elevator doors opened on the silent floor. I exited and paused outside the conference room door, adjusting my posture. The handle was cold metal beneath my palm. I inhaled, then turned it. The room was already filling. Claire, Mr. Cheng, Jonathan, Lydia, and the others were seated, murmuring among themselves. At the head of the table, Harold stood beside the projector screen, a stiff smile plastered on his face. Their eyes flickered to me as I entered. Some wore curiosity, others thinly veiled hostility. I returned each glance with calm assurance. I placed my tablet on the lectern and took the floor. "As everyone knows, we're at a critical juncture," I began, voice clear over the hush. "This morning, I'm here not just as a candidate for reinstatement, but as a majority shareholder ready to lead." I clicked to slide 1. The screen displayed my summary, ownership percentage, the slate of strategic objectives, and the 4 named directors in support. I watched as Claire's expression shifted, satisfaction tempered with calculation. Mr. Cheng folded his arms, nodding once. Lydia scribbled notes. Harold cleared his throat, eyes darting to the slide. "Ms. Grant, if I may." I interrupted, voice polite but firm. "Please hold questions until the end of the presentation. I want to ensure you have the full scope before deliberating." Their whispers fell silent. The tension ratcheted up another notch. Slide 2. A timeline of proxy acquisitions. Dots on a chart traced the discrete share purchases I'd orchestrated 6 months ago. I paused, letting them absorb the breadth of my strategic foresight. Then slide 3, the Q4 pipeline. Charts showing key clients, projected revenue, retention probabilities under my leadership versus without. Testimonials from top executives at GreenTech and Meridian, scrolled at the bottom in italicized text. I spoke to each point, voice steady, weaving anecdotes of calls made at odd hours, tailored solution proposals, negotiation breakthroughs that only I could broker. Halfway through, Claire raised a hand. You've presented compelling data, Nicole, but finances are one thing. Can you ensure cohesion in leadership? Morale's been shaky. I approached the podium. Leadership cohesion starts with transparency and clear communication. That's why I propose weekly executive syncs, open forums for department chairs, and quarterly all-hands meetings. We'll build trust through routine engagement. I unlocked the next slide, a calendar mock-up of proposed meetings. Mr. Chang leaned forward. Risk controls? I need specifics. I switched to dedicated risk slide. Worst-case scenarios, mitigations, escalation protocols, alerts for any deviation beyond 5% margin, dual sign-off for major contracts, real-time dashboard access, so nothing slips under the radar. Lydia quietly nodded as she scanned the slide. Others exchanged looks. The room felt electrified, each board member confronting the reality. I had thought through every challenge. At the end of my presentation, I allowed a pregnant pause. Then, with deliberate clarity, I said, I now open the floor for the vote on reinstatement and leadership appointment. I trust each of you will act in the best interest of Langley and Holt. Jonathan cleared his throat. I move to rescind Ms. Grant's termination and reinstate her as Director of Strategic Accounts. He glanced at Claire, who nodded. Lydia seconded. Mr. Chang raised his hand in agreement. One by one, hands went up. 6-1, Harold the lone dissent. He stood, lips pressed in a thin line. I object. I don't believe this is sufficient. His tone cracked on the last word, revealing more fear than conviction. Claire's voice rang out. Your objection is noted, Harold. The motion carries. She looked to me, offering a rare, genuine smile. Something shifted in the room. I closed my eyes for a split second. The silence that followed was heavy, a chamber brimming with possibility. As the boardroom lights dimmed and the motion was recorded, I sensed a new chapter unfolding. But just as relief washed over me, a sharp buzz came from under the table. My phone vibrated, screen lighting up with an urgent notification. SEC inquiry, unusual insider transactions flagged. The boardroom fell silent again. All eyes snapped to me. I swallowed, heart pounding. The next move would define everything. The boardroom's tension coiled tighter than a spring as the SEC notification glowed on my phone. Every eye fixed on me, Claire's sympathetic gaze, Chang's narrowed stare, Lydia's pens poised mid-air, Jonathan's frown deepening, Harold's lips twitching in what looked like panic. I silenced the notification and locked my phone. It appears our proxy acquisition triggered an alert, I said, voice steady though my heart galloped. Let's address it head on. Harold cleared his throat. Is this legal? I stood and moved to the head of the table. Yes, the transfer was fully compliant. All purchases occurred within regulatory guidelines, and we have documentation ready for immediate review. I gestured to my tablet, pulling up a folder titled Compliance Dossier. This includes notarized transaction records, chain of title affidavits, brokerage confirmations, and time-stamped proxy agreements. Lydia leaned forward, reading the title. We need to preempt any inquiry. We can't afford delays. Agreed, I said. I propose appointing an internal compliance task force to work with our legal counsel and the SEC liaisons. We'll submit the dossier this afternoon, accompanied by a board resolution affirming our commitment to transparency. Mr. Chang nodded once. And the minor shareholders? They'll reaffirm their voting status in writing, I replied. I'll have them sign affidavits immediately. Claire exhaled, tension easing. Make it happen. I returned to my seat, the board resuming discussion with renewed purpose. The vote? The victory? It hung in the balance of regulatory review. but I was ready. Once the meeting adjourned, I retreated to my office enclave to assemble the task force. Elise ensured the room was clear for our session while I sifted through documents. My tablet pinged, email from Mira, with an updated timeline for SEC engagement. I relayed the news to my small group. Elise, my assistant, Greg Sanders from legal, and Priya Nair, head of governance. They formed a tight circle around the small conference table. I laid out the plan. Immediate dossier submission, shareholder affirmations, legal liaisons engaged. Each had assignments and deadlines before sundown. As we worked, my phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unexpected number. We should talk. Tonight. Under the arch. No name, no context. My stomach tightened. Was it a competitor, an insider, a threat, or an ally? I couldn't ignore it. At 6 p.m., after delivering the SEC package to the lobby for courier pickup, I stepped out of the building and walked toward Washington Square Arch. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the park. I saw a figure leaning against the marble, a man in a navy coat, face half hidden. He checked his watch as I approached. "Nicole Grant," he said, voice low. "You called?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He straightened, revealing sharp features I recognized from a LinkedIn post. Marcus Delaney, a senior partner at Delaney & Cross, the law firm representing one of our rival firms. "What do you want?" I asked, folding my arms. He smirked. "To offer a deal. Our board wants Langley & Holt destabilized during its transition. They've earmarked funds to short your shares, figuring if the SEC slows you, the stock price will drop. I'm here to say, stop, withdraw your proxies, and we'll call it off." My blood ran cold, but I forced calm. "I don't bargain with blackmail." Marcus chuckled. "Consider it a courtesy call. You're playing with fire. Winds may shift." "I'll burn with it," I said. "I won't cede control to bullies." He studied me and finally nodded. "I admire your backbone, Nicole, but remember, power attracts predators." With that, he turned and melted into the dusk crowd. I watched him go, heart pounding. My victory road was littered with traps. Under the arch, I raised my phone and typed 3 words to Mira: "Need contingency plan." Then I headed back to the office, heels clicking on the pavement, mind racing with strategies. Tomorrow would require every ounce of resolve, but I was ready to fight. Dawn crept through the slats of my blinds, painting streaks of cold light across the living room floor. I pushed myself up from the sofa where exhaustion had claimed me after last night's confrontation. The city was already stirring. Car horns, distant sirens, the low drone of morning rush. None of it was mine yet. Today, I resolved I would claim it. I dipped into the kitchen for coffee but paused midway, staring at the steaming French press. The warning from Marcus Delaney weighed on me. A rival's threat was one thing. An SEC inquiry paired with financial predation was something else entirely. I sipped, tasting both caffeine and fear. My phone buzzed. Mira's text: "SEC preliminary okay. They'll reply in 24 hours. Work on public communications." I exhaled. Enough to steady my racing pulse. Public communications. I needed to control the narrative before rivals twisted it. I drafted a statement for the company website. Director reinstated, majority shareholder, commitment to transparency, Q4 targets, regulatory cooperation. But it needed polish. Elise would refine it later. After breakfast, protein shake, no hesitation. I suited up again. Today's wardrobe was a navy sheath dress under a tailored blazer. Understated power. I collected my tablet, files, and headed out. At 9 a.m., I arrived at the office. The lobby buzzed with security clearance. Everyone recognized my name but not my authority. That would change. Elise met me with a stack of coffee cups and a stern look. "We have a crisis management meeting at 10. PR, legal, finance teams. Dress code, crisis casual." I nodded, taking the coffee. "Let's brief." In the glass-walled war room, a dozen executives awaited. Head of PR, Emily Shaw, CFO, Darren King, legal counsel, Greg Sanders, compliance lead, Priya, digital strategist, Jonah Miller. Emily began. "Social media's wild. They're calling you a coup plotter. We need an official statement by noon. I stood. We control the message. We're protecting shareholder value, ensuring continuity. No mention of proxy or SEC. Focus on leadership, vision, and growth. Darren frowned. The stock's down 5% since yesterday's news. I tapped my tablet, a slide showing recovery projections. Announce a $200 million pipeline, secure green tech renewal, show solvency. Jonah chimed in. Push on LinkedIn, Twitter with executive quotes, your quotes, leverage your profile. I agreed. Draft. I'm honored to lead Langley & Holt into its next chapter. They scribbled notes, jumped into action. At 11:30, Claire arrived. She closed the door and said, Nicole, word is you're going public with this story. Are we aligned? I nodded. Full transparency on leadership change, no mention of adversaries, keep it professional. She exhaled, tension easing. You have my support. We release at noon. The press release went live. Within minutes, newswires lit up. Employees pinged me. Texts, emails, concerned, excited. Clients called. Are you staying? Will service continue? I assured each. We're stronger than ever. By afternoon, I gathered crucial stakeholders. GreenTech's CEO, Frank Mitchell, Meridian's CFO, Maria Ribeiro, and Argonav's board chair. Each call reinforced their loyalty. Each conversation reaffirmed my value. But my win was tempered. An email from SEC liaison asking for an interview, scheduled for tomorrow morning. I leaned back in my office chair, fatigue and exhilaration tangled. The tide was turning, but the tide could also turn on me. That evening, as I walked past the lobby art, a bronze scout statue, I paused. I thought of my journey. Scholarship student from Ohio, sales representative hustling evenings, hidden shareholder emerging as queenmaker. Tomorrow, the SEC meeting. Tonight, I prepared. I reviewed dossier, prepped responses, ran mock chive with Mira and Greg. Finally, I left the office, the skyscraper aglow behind me. The city had not calmed, but it listened now. Because I owned half of its heartbeat. The morning light felt harsher than usual as I entered the SEC's Midtown offices. The building's polished stone facade reflected the city in cool, impersonal fragments. I steadied myself. This was the ultimate test. Not a boardroom with familiar faces, but a government chamber where reputations and legality converged. Mira met me by the security checkpoint, her expression tight. Remember, honesty, clarity, transparency, she whispered. I nodded, fingers tightening on my briefcase. Inside, we were ushered to a conference room, one long table, sterile carpet, federal seals on the walls. Two liaison officers sat at the far end, Ms. Patel and Mr. Hawkins. Neither offered a greeting beyond a curt nod. I set my folder on the table and sat Mira at my side. Patel opened a file. Ms. Grant, thank you for coming. We have questions about your recent proxy acquisitions. I exhaled. I'm prepared to provide all documents. Hawkins interjected. We noticed share purchases spanning 6 months in escalating quantities, culminating in your LLC's 9.6% stake. Investigators want to ensure there was no insider trading or market manipulation. Quote, I placed notarized transaction records and communications in front of them. All acquisitions were made on open market platforms, at listed prices, through my LLC. I had no non-public information beyond regular public releases and board meetings, which I did not attend until this week. Patel scanned the documents. We also have a whistleblower tip suggesting you coordinated purchases with a company executive to front-run announcements. My chest tightened. That's impossible. I acquired shares through my own capital. The executive you reference retired 6 months before the first share purchase was deposited. I handed over retirement paperwork. You'll find no evidence of coordination. Mira leaned forward. We request your permission to subpoena brokerage records for verification. I nodded without hesitation. Of course, anything to expedite clarity. For an hour they drilled down, timestamps, trade confirmations, my communications with brokers. Each question I answered with documented proof. Emails, bank statements, notarized affidavits. At last, Patel closed the file. Thank you. We will conduct further verification. We expect to clear this by next week. No actions pending if your information remains consistent. I exhaled, relief flooding. I stood. Thank you for your time. In the elevator down, Mira exhaled. You handled that beautifully. I managed a wan smile. Now on to managing momentum at work. Back at Langley and Holt, the news of our SEC status downgrade cycle energized staff. I held an all-hands meeting in the atrium, floor-to-ceiling windows behind me, ribbon of sunrise sweeping the cityscape. I spoke without notes. This week tested our resilience, but we emerged stronger. We're transparent, accountable, and ready to deliver exceptional results. I saw nods, applause, a spark in the crowd. My leadership had found roots. After the meeting, I retreated to my office. A message blinked on my screen. Our stock had regained 2%. Small victory, but crucial. Elise popped her head in. Frank Mitchell wants to stop by. He's in town. GreenTech's CEO was an early ally. I agreed. Minutes later, he sat across from me, coffee in hand. Nicole, he began, that SEC meeting could have sunk us. But you handled it. We're increasing our contract by 15%. I felt a thrill. Thank you. That'll send confidence to the market. He nodded. I'll tell my board to follow suit. Quote, that afternoon I drafted emails, one to the board summarizing today's gains, one to employees acknowledging their trust, one to clients reaffirming stability. But as I prepared to leave for the day, a final twist surfaced. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message, meet me at midnight at the docks. Then, we talk. No signature. Docks. Midnight. Another shadow from my past or a new threat? My pulse spiked. I stared at the message, weighing options. I shut down my computer, grabbed my coat, and stepped into the lobby. The salty breeze hit me as I stepped onto the creaking wooden dock, the moon a silver sliver above the East River. The faint glow of lighthouse beacons danced across the water's surface, and shipping containers loomed like silent sentinels. Midnight at the docks was a world apart from boardroom battles. No phone chatter, no hushed power plays, just the lapping waves and hollow echoes of distant foghorns. I wasn't sure who invited me here, or why. The encrypted message had left me with nothing but an address and a time. I'd brought a coat, not for warmth, but in case I needed something to hide behind. My thoughts reeled back through the last 24 hours. SEC acquittal, stock rebound, Frank's new contract. Progress, yes, but tangles remained in the shadows. Elise had tried to talk me out of it. Don't walk into a trap, she'd said, but I couldn't ignore it. If this was an ally, I needed the intel. If an enemy, I needed the advantage. I squared my shoulders and walked deeper into the night. At the end of the dock, a solitary figure waited. I recognized the outline, a slim form, tall, hands clasped behind the back. It was Mira. Mira? I whispered, more relieved than I'd admit. She stepped forward, eyes scanning the water. I needed to get you off alert lists, she began quietly. Our communications were compromised. We've had leaks. Someone tipped off the SEC before we filed, and they've been listening to our calls. My stomach clenched. Wiretaps? I hissed. She nodded. And there's more. The person behind it isn't in this company. They're using an intermediary. But the real target is you. They're trying to undermine you at every turn. I inhaled, steeling myself. Who? She shook her head. I don't know yet, but I'm tracing it. By Monday, we'll have answers. Until then, lay low. No more midnight ventures. I closed my eyes against the cool wind. This war had just added a new front. Thank you, I said. But you're right. Tomorrow, I regroup. We walked back together, each step echoing our resolve. The boardroom storms could wait. Tonight, we guarded our backs. Returned to my apartment, I reviewed my schedule. Monday's board meeting, Tuesday's client dinners, Wednesday's audit committee. And in the margins, a note. Investigate leaks. Protect communications. I shut my laptop and looked at the framed photo on my desk. A younger me, accepting a scholarship, proud and hopeful. I smiled softly. The journey from that stage to this dock had tested me. It would test me more still. But this was my story. and I would see it through. Morning came too soon. As sunlight filtered through my curtains, I felt the weight of last night's revelations, the sense that hidden eyes watched my every move. But the day's duties beckoned, reminders that my corporate empire demanded steady hands. First on the agenda, an emergency meeting with the IT security team. I arrived at Langley & Holt's secure server room just after 8, greeted by Raj Patel, our head of cybersecurity, and his team huddled around multiple monitors flickering with code and network maps. "Nicole," Raj said, swiveling his chair. "We've identified multiple intrusion attempts over the past week. IP addresses masked through VPNs, targeting your communications, and the board's emails." He tapped the console. "This morning alone, we blocked 6 unauthorized logins." I frowned. "Can we trace them?" He handed me a printout. "These hops trace through servers in 3 countries. We've quarantined suspected malware, but we need to assume they're patient, watching." My mind raced. "Set up encrypted channels for board members. Disable all remote access for my accounts until cleared. Change all proxy passwords." I paused. "And monitor for anomalies in financial reporting." Raj nodded. "On it." Next, I moved to the war room. The board had convened earlier than scheduled. Claire, Chang, Lydia, and Jonathan already seated. "Nicole," Claire said, relief evident. "We heard about the SEC and the hack. Is everything under control?" I closed the door. "The SEC is satisfied for now. Our security team is isolating the breaches. But this is more than corporate espionage. It's personal. Someone's targeting me through the company's vulnerabilities." Lydia frowned. "Could this be linked to the proxy transfer?" "Likely," I replied. "We need to secure every angle. I propose we form an internal incident response team and hire external specialists. And I need the board's authority to conduct a full forensic audit." Chang folded his arms. "That'll cost time and money." I met his gaze. "Or we risk losing everything." Claire nodded. "Do it." Full audit and external freeze on sensitive communications. Lydia, coordinate with compliance. Jonathan, help me find a retainer for a top-tier cybersecurity firm. Jonathan scribbled notes. Consider it done. The meeting adjourned, and I retreated to my office to breathe. A knock sounded. Elise peeked in. "Everything all right?" I forced a calm smile. "As well as can be. Keep all calls to secure lines and remind everyone not to discuss this over mobile devices." She nodded and left. By midday, I had a flurry of calls. GreenTech wanted assurance. Meridian's CFO wanted clarity on the breach. Argonav's board chair wanted a direct call. Each required careful reassurance. But through each conversation, I maintained a steady voice. Transparent, decisive, unflappable. At 3 p.m., I met with external cybersecurity consultants from CipherGuard. They laid out a 6-point recovery plan: system-wide vulnerability scans, encryption of legacy servers, staff training, multi-factor authentication overhaul, incident communication strategy, and ongoing threat hunting. I listened, interjected, asked questions, and approved the budget. Make it robust. I want zero tolerance for intrusion. As I left their offices, phone buzzed again. An anonymous tip. Look closer at board auditors. Betrayal isn't always external. I stared at the message. The boardroom seemed too calm. Could one of them be feeding my enemies? I pocketed my phone, pulse quickening. Tomorrow, I'd need to confront the board with this possibility. But first, I'd strengthen the walls. The city lights blurred as I drove home, fatigue settling under my resolve. This fight had become more than corporate strategy. It was a struggle for survival in shadows. I reached the apartment, head full of firewalls and betrayals. I did not yet know who sat behind the traitor's mask, but I would find out. Tomorrow, I'd call a private session with the board, and I'd ask the hard questions. I summoned the board to an unscheduled session late Friday afternoon. The conference room's glass walls reflected the golden hour light, but inside the air was heavy with suspicion. Claire, Chang, Lydia, Jonathan, and even Harold, who'd stormed back into his old office after the vote, took their seats. The forensic investigators from CipherGuard sat beside me. I closed the door and began, Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We face not just external threats, but potential internal compromise. Yesterday, I received an anonymous tip indicating that one of you may be leaking confidential information. Gasps and nervous glances ricocheted around the table. Mr. Cheng's fingers curled into his palms. Lydia's pen hovered over her notepad, twitching. Claire's jaw tightened, while Jonathan's eyes flicked to Harold, who avoided everyone's gaze. I continued, voice cool. Our security team has detected unusual login patterns traced to a board member's credentials, accessing communications between myself and legal counsel outside of normal hours. The timestamps match the windows when sensitive data was sent to the SEC and to Mr. Delaney's intermediaries. Today, we'll conduct a privileged access audit. Each of you will provide your device logs and email metadata for review. This process will be conducted by our external team, under strict confidentiality. A tense silence settled. Jonathan cleared his throat. Nicole, this feels like an ambush. Why wouldn't you bring in HR? I looked at him directly. Because HR reports to the CEO, who may not be impartial. This is a matter of survival for the company. Claire exhaled. I stand with due process, but this could ruin trust among us. I nodded. That's why we need transparency now, before it festers into distrust that could sink us. I turned to the investigators. Let's begin. They produced tablets and quietly dispersed to each member, requesting logs. As they worked, I addressed the board. I understand this is uncomfortable, but Sterling leadership demands accountability. We cannot afford leaks or manipulation. I paused. This company is my passion, and I refuse to watch it crumble. I let the weight of my words settle. The investigators completed their preliminary scans and regrouped. One by one, they reported back. Claire's credentials showed no anomalies. Cheng's activity was clean. Lydia's logs matched her pattern. Jonathan's device showed nothing suspicious. Then Harold's. The lead investigator's face hardened. Mr. Montgomery's account was used to access encrypted communications at 2:14 a.m., the same time we traced an email forwarding my proxy agreement to an external address. The room went still. All eyes turned to Harold. His confident facade shattered. Why? I whispered. Harold's voice shook. I panicked. I thought if I handed over evidence of your control, I could negotiate my position. He swallowed. They offered me a golden parachute. If I weakened you, they'd buy me out. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. Claire's lips pursed. You endangered us all. I rose, heart heavy but resolute. Harold, you'll resign immediately. You'll cooperate fully with any investigations. And you'll hand over any communications or material related to this. I looked at the board. We move forward clean. Harold nodded, tears glistening. The investigators escorted him out, silently, carrying tablets and wiping the slate clean. I exhaled deeply, turning back to the remaining 4 members. Trust restored. Now we rebuild. Monday, we finalize my official title, CEO Designate and Chair of the Board. Then, we begin our strategic vision sessions for 2026 planning. I offered a small smile. Are we agreed? They all nodded solemnly. At that moment, the golden light through the windows felt warmer. We had purged betrayal and emerged united. But in the silence that followed, I saw Claire's gaze linger on me. A question unspoken hung between us. Was she next? Or would she stand unwaveringly at my side? Tomorrow promised new challenges. But for tonight, I allowed myself a fleeting sense of triumph. Monday morning dawned not with relief, but with purpose. I walked into the boardroom wearing my new title on a sleek business card. Nicole Grant, CEO Designate and Chair of the Board, Langley and Holt. The weight of it felt good, like stepping into the armor I was meant to wear. The remaining 4 board members sat around the table, their faces composed. Claire offered a nod of solidarity as I placed my tablet at the lectern. Good morning. Today marks our first meeting under our renewed mandate. I'll outline our strategic objectives for the next fiscal year and assign responsibilities. I tapped the screen. Q1 goals. client expansion, digital transformation, risk fortification, talent retention. Jonathan leaned in. Impressive slate. I continued. First, client expansion. We secure the GreenTech and Meridian renewals by end of Q1. Beyond that, we pursue 2 new defense contracts. Top priority. Lydia and Emily coordinate on proposal readiness and client engagement. Lydia nodded. We'll have drafts by Friday. Next slide, digital transformation roadmap. Jonah, lead the transition to our proprietary CRM platform. Integrate AI insights into client workflows. We aim to reduce churn by 15%. Jonathan adjusted his glasses, already assembling the team. The third objective, risk fortification. I glanced at Claire. Priya and Raj, finalize our cybersecurity framework deployment by Q1 end. Include third-party assessments and annual drills. Claire affirmed, we're on schedule. Finally, talent retention. I propose quarterly leadership roundtables, mentorship programs, and revised incentive structures. Darren, draft options by next week. The room hummed with engagement. For the first time, I felt the board's synergy aligning with my vision. At 11 a.m., as the meeting adjourned, Claire stayed behind. Nicole, I have a request. I'd like to lead our upcoming investor roadshow. I've rebuilt my confidence, and I think I can represent us well. I considered. Claire's renewed loyalty was invaluable. Agreed. Let's prep together. She smiled. Thank you. Outside the boardroom, Jonathan flagged me. Your leadership is already making waves. I've heard chatter. Stock's up 3%. I nodded. Pride and caution mingling. Keep me updated. Back in my office, I paused at my desk. A delivery awaited. A leather-bound notebook with Grant Capital embossed in gold. Inside, an inscription, to future chapters, from my father. I traced the inscription, remembering his lessons on resilience. My journey, from fired employee to CEO designate, had been forged on grit and wisdom. Ahead lay uncharted terrain, market fluctuations, competitive threats, growth plateaus. But I was no longer afraid of unknowns. I opened the notebook and wrote the date, July 21st, 2025. Beneath it, I penned the day's mission: lead with integrity, innovate relentlessly, inspire always. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows as I settled into the executive theater, a smaller, plush conference room reserved for high-stakes briefings. Outside, the rumble of Manhattan traffic echoed faintly. Inside, I faced the dream team: Frank Mitchell, GreenTech's CEO, Maria Ribeiro, Meridian's CFO, and Argonav's board chair, Douglas Finch. They occupied plush leather chairs surrounding a polished mahogany table, eyes reflecting equal parts curiosity and confidence. I offered them coffee and mineral water before beginning. Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have an opportunity to redefine our partnership for mutual growth. I clicked the remote and the screen lit up. Strategic Alliance Proposal, 2026 and beyond. Frank leaned forward. Nicole, your recent leadership pivot has been impressive, and we're keen to secure a long-term collaboration. I nodded. Our proposal outlines a 3-phase plan. Phase 1, consolidated project task forces with joint oversight. Phase 2, co-development of defense-grade sensors leveraging GreenTech's innovation and Langley and Holt's distribution network. Phase 3, equity participation, up to 10% stake in your ventures, aligning incentives. Maria perused the document. Equity participation requires board approval and valuation assessments. Of course, I replied. Our respective financial teams will coordinate valuations, but we believe shared risk drives shared reward. Douglas Draper, the Argonav chair, asked, Timeline? I advanced the slide, a Gantt chart marking milestones. Phase 1 kickoff next quarter, Phase 2 prototypes by Q3, equity terms finalized by year-end. We aim for initial contracts inked by December. Frank smiled. I like the ambition. I allowed myself a small nod before shifting tone. However, we must address the security implications. Our recent cyber incident, though contained, signals an urgent need for jointly reinforced protocols. To that end, we propose a shared cybersecurity task force with rotating leadership. Maria exchanged glances with Frank. Joint protocols could delay our timelines. I set down the remote. I'd rather delay for 30 days than risk data breaches that destroy both our reputations. They mulled it. Silence draped the room like velvet. Finally, Frank spoke. Agreed. Security is paramount. I clicked again. One more item. The slide showed a news clipping. Langley and Holt stock surges amid executive shakeup. I tapped the article. Our market cap has increased by $500 million since your announcements. This momentum is our leverage point. If we strike while the iron's hot, we can secure unprecedented partnerships. Maria tapped her pen. Excellent. We'll take this to our boards. Douglas nodded. Count us in, pending final terms. I closed the laptop. Then we moved to drafting memoranda. I'll have Elise coordinate details. Thank you for your partnership and trust. They rose, shaken hands all around. As the door clicked shut, I exhaled. The alliance was on track. Yet as I replayed their faces, I sensed unspoken thoughts, hesitations under the surface. Later, back in my office, I reviewed emails, congratulatory notes, legal drafts, updated valuations. The plan was unfolding. But one message stood out. A single line in an internal memo from Priya. Unusual directive from Claire. Suspend external communications for 48 hours. Claire? My ally in the boardroom. Why would she restrict communications, unless she had reasons beyond protocol? I tapped my phone to call her. No answer. I glanced at the clock. 7:45 p.m. Office almost deserted. Outside, the city lights blinked like constellations in a universe of possibilities. I needed to know, what was Claire's game? Was she safeguarding our plans or masking her own agenda? I grabbed my coat and headed into the hallway, determination propelling me. The next move would reveal whether Claire remained friend or had quietly become another rival. As I reached her office door, it stood ajar. I inhaled, then stepped inside. The room was empty, but an envelope lay on her desk, embossed with my initials. I approached, heart pounding, and lifted the flap. Inside, a single sheet. Meet me where it all began. Midnight. Be prepared. My breath caught. Where it all began. My mind raced back through years of late-night client calls. My first sales pitch, the empty conference room at dawn where I decided to invest in my own shares. But one place stood above the rest. The Langley and Holt rooftop helipad, where I once watched the sunrise after closing my first six-figure deal. I folded the note slowly, sliding it into my pocket. The room felt suddenly too still. Midnight, rooftop. The next chapter was set, a clandestine rendezvous beneath the city sky. And I knew that come tomorrow night, the revelations would reshape everything. The office floor was deserted when I slipped out, the hushed hum of the building's air handlers the only sound. I took the elevator to the 28th floor, heart thrumming like a war drum. The rooftop helipad access door glowed red, a beacon guiding me to the unknown. As I stepped onto the rooftop, the city unfolded beneath me, a tapestry of lights, teeming with lives I both led and served. The helipad's circular expanse felt small against the infinite sky above. And there she was, Claire Holt Wilkins, silhouette poised against the skyline. She turned slowly as I approached, her expression unreadable. You came, she said, voice low. I had to know what this was about, I replied. She held out a manila folder. I wanted to be sure you were ready before revealing my part in this. I took it, flicking the clasp open. Inside were documents, emails, a detailed timeline, evidence that Claire had been monitoring Harold and orchestrating the audit request to root out the leak. But there was more. A dossier on Delaney and Cross, their schemes to destabilize Langley and Holt, and connections to entities on the SEC watch list. Claire's voice broke the silence. I've been your ally from the start. I didn't trust Harold or the so-called rivals. I wanted hard evidence before I committed fully. I processed the files. Each page added context. Claire's secret consulting with security, her independent audit oversight, her early support for my proxy acquisition. "Why now?" I asked. She gestured to the skyline. "This city thrives on bold moves and secrecy. I saw your hand play out like a master strategist. But I needed to know you'd do the right thing when power was real." I closed the folder and met her gaze. "I understand loyalty, Claire. I also know how easily trust can be broken." She exhaled, the tension easing. "I'm here to propose a final alliance. We lead together, equally, CEO and COO. You bring vision, I bring stability." My mind raced. Chief Operating Officer, giving up chair? But a partnership with Claire would fortify the board's balance and address concerns about my rapid ascent. I studied the city, weighing ambition against alliance. "Together, then, we'll unveil the full plan at the next board meeting. United front." She nodded. "Tomorrow, we secure our mutual path." Above the city, on the helipad, 2 women stood as equals, leaders bonded by trials and trust. And as the wind swept across the rooftop, I knew I had found my true partner for the next act of this remarkable journey. The dawn after our rooftop alliance was quiet, almost sacred. Claire and I arrived at the office together, stepping onto the 27th floor side by side. Our shared nod spoke volumes. The board would meet a unified front. In the boardroom, the tension from last week's betrayals had dissipated, replaced by cautious optimism. Claire and I sat at the head, our combined presence drawing respectful silence from the assembled executives and remaining staff. Harold's departure had left a void in day-to-day operations, but Claire and I had worked through the night drafting our joint charter, proposed governance reforms, coded checks and balances, and a clear CEO-COO division of duties. I would focus on external strategy, client relations, market expansions, board directives, while Claire would oversee internal operations, compliance, finance, talent, and corporate culture. The board meeting opened with my summary of recent wins: green tech renewal, SEC clearance pending, stock recovery, and initial financial projections for Q1. Claire followed with her plan for cybersecurity overhaul, governance reforms, and an HR initiative to boost retention among high performers. By mid-morning, we were reviewing the governance reform charter. Clause 1. All board-level communications pertaining to mergers, acquisitions, or proxy actions require dual CEO-COO approval. I read aloud. Clause 2. Establishment of a permanent ethics committee chaired by Claire Holt-Wilkins. Claire continued. A ripple of approval went around the table. Even Jonathan, the most reserved, nodded. Lydia scribbled notes with newfound respect. Chang offered a firm thumbs up. Then Claire introduced a surprise. Clause 3. Immediate audit of all backlogged RAND projects and resource allocation. We'll ensure every dollar is driving strategic value. Darren King, CFO, raised an eyebrow. That's a thorough sweep, huge resource demands. Necessary to root out inefficiencies, Claire replied. We can't rebuild trust without showing fiscal responsibility. I added, and we'll reallocate savings to our top 3 growth initiatives. The board voted unanimously. We had restructured governance, fortified ethics, and set the stage for disciplined growth. As the meeting adjourned, I felt a surge of triumph, but also an undercurrent of anticipation. We had reset the course, but executing this charter would test every promise made. Later that afternoon, I met with Emily Shaw and Jonah Miller to craft our investor presentation, now rebranded to include the Claire Nicole Partnership. We worked with whiteboards and markers, sketching storylines that showcased our dual leadership model as a template for modern corporate resilience. By sunset, the deck was ready for tomorrow's investor roadshow. I signed off with a final click, then turned to Claire's office, determined to share the moment. But her door was closed. I paused outside, then knocked gently. No answer. I pushed the door open. Inside, Claire's desk was empty. Her folders gone, nameplate missing. The window was ajar, curtains swaying. My heart lurched. I scanned the room. Claire's laptop was gone. Papers shuffled across the floor as if grabbed in haste. A single sticky note on the desk read, "Check the server logs." I stifled a gasp. Claire, my ally, my partner, was gone, and the note suggested foul play. I rushed to her computer workstation, fingers trembling. The server logs folder was still pinned, each file time-stamped. I clicked the most recent entry. Frames of code scrolled too quickly, then froze on an IP address I recognized. The screen flashed. Unauthorized access detected. My mind flashed to Marcus Delaney's schemes. I bolted from the office, racing down the corridor. Claire was in danger, and the next move could cost everything. I burst into the empty war room, heart pounding so fiercely I feared it would echo in my ears. The screens lining the walls displayed real-time server metrics, security alerts, and network maps, all still active. I slammed my palm on the console. "Raj!" I shouted. Moments later, Raj Patel, head of cybersecurity, and his deputy, Leah Carter, rushed in. "What's wrong?" Raj asked. "The server logs," a sticky note from Claire. "Someone accessed her files, and then she disappeared. I need everything you have on her recent activity." Leah typed swiftly as Raj nodded. "Give us a minute." I paced, mind racing. Claire had been my ally. We'd formed a partnership that bridged our strengths. Now, she was gone. Possibly compromised, possibly betrayed. On top of everything, a sense of personal failure knotted in my chest. In under 60 seconds, Leah spun the terminal around. "Here," she said. "This is Claire's access log from last night." On the screen, directory paths and timestamps scrolled. At 8:13 p.m., Claire's credentials initiated a remote upload to an external IP. Then, at 8:17 p.m., her session ended. No sign of her logging out. The next entry, her badge access. Timestamp 8:20 p.m., she left the building through the service elevator. "What IP?" I demanded. Leah swallowed. "It's behind a VPN, but it resolves to a data center leased by Delaney and Cross." My stomach sank. Marcus Delaney, rival law firm partner, who threatened earlier. His tentacles reached deeper than I feared. "We need video surveillance," I said. "Track her path from the service elevator to the docks." Raj nodded. "On it. I'll pull feeds from the basement exit." As they worked, I sent a secure message to Claire's phone. No reply. Next, I raised Mira's number. She answered on the second ring. "Mira, Claire's missing. We have her logs. She was uploaded data to Delaney's IP and left via service exit. I need backup, legal support, everything." "I'm on it. Mobilizing private investigators. I'll be there in 10. I hung up and turned back to Raj. "Do we know where that IP triggers?" I asked. He punched keys. "Yes. It traces to an abandoned warehouse on Pier 42. My jaw clenched. The same docks where I met Marcus. The same docks where Claire's note could have been penned. "All right," I said, steeling myself. "I'm going there." Discreetly. "Leah, find a secure route. Raj, lock down communications. No one knows where I'm headed. Leah, pack the to-go earpiece." Within 15 minutes, I was in a black SUV, tinted windows cloaking me from the midday glare. Mira slid into the seat beside me. "Nicole," she said softly, "I've alerted local law. This is now a missing person and corporate kidnapping case." I nodded, eyes fierce. Priority 1, get Claire back safely. Priority 2, bring Delaney and Cross to justice. Mira exhaled. "Let's go." The SUV weaved through gridlocked streets until the skyline shifted, the skeletal framework of warehouses and piers. We arrived at Pier 42. The warehouse loomed, rusted steel, boarded windows, graffiti-stained walls. I felt the weight of every step as we approached. Raj and 2 investigators flanked us. Leah stayed in the vehicle, keeping guard. Mira carried a flashlight. I had my phone recording. We eased through a side entrance, where a battered door hung ajar. Inside, the warehouse was cavernous, shadows stretching between rusted support beams. Mira whispered, "There's Claire's coat." She pointed to a crumpled navy blazer draped over a metal crate. My pulse surged. I moved forward, breath shallow. A muffled groan echoed from the far end. I sprinted, heart slamming. We rounded a stack of crates. and there she was, Claire, bound to a chair, a single spotlight illuminating her. "Claire!" I gasped, rushing forward. She looked up, pain and relief mingling in her eyes. "Nicole!" Before I could reach her, a voice boomed from the shadows. "Impressive rescue attempt?" Marcus Delaney stepped into the light, flanked by two burly figures. Mira gasped. Raj tensed. Marcus smiled. A cold, triumphant curve. "You're too late, Ms. Grant. You have power in the boardroom, but out here, you're at my mercy." I squared my shoulders. "Let her go, Marcus. This isn't how you win." He chuckled. "Oh, but it is. You've played a bold hand, but the house always wins eventually." One of the henchmen aimed a gun at me. I froze. Claire whimpered. Mira's eyes blazed. "Back off." Marcus raised a hand. "Not so dramatic, friend. Lower your weapon, and I'll let your friend go unharmed, once I'm sure you can't trace this to me." I swallowed. Every instinct screamed to fight, but Claire's safety was paramount. "Fine," I said, voice tight. "What do you want?" Marcus smiled wider. "Your resignation." I felt nausea rise. "Resign? After everything?" He cocked his head. "Or she suffers consequences." I glanced at Claire, her face pale, resilient. My mind raced. Proxy hold, board votes, legal leverage. None could save her here. I locked eyes with Marcus. Then, slowly, I nodded. "Agreed?" He signaled his goon, the gun lowered slightly. He stepped forward, unclipping Claire's ropes. As her hands slid free, she stared at me, betrayal and fear in her gaze. Marcus's grinning face hovered. "Your move." I drew in a breath. Then, in one swift motion, Claire kicked at the henchman's kneecap. He yelped, stumbled. I dove forward, tackling him to the floor. Mira grabbed the other henchman in a chokehold. Chaos erupted. Raj tackled Marcus. Leah sprinted in, earpiece crackling. Within seconds, Cypher Guard operatives stormed in, guns drawn, alerted by the remote tracking device Claire had hidden in her pen. Marcus cursed, pushing Raj off him, then bolted toward a back exit, but a shot rang out, a warning shot, and he froze, raising his hands. By the time police and medics flooded the warehouse, Claire was in my arms. She trembled as I hugged her. Mira knelt beside us. "You're safe now." Claire leaned into me, voice barely a whisper. "I knew you'd come." I kissed her forehead. "Always." As officers cuffed Marcus and his cohorts, I felt exhaustion, relief, and a fierce pride. We had survived the darkness and emerged together. This was our crucible. And we had been reforged. The morning after Claire's rescue, the office felt like the calm after a storm, still charged, brittle with relief and adrenaline. I entered the boardroom before anyone else, sunlight slanting across the polished table. I sank into my chair and pulled the dossier from the previous night's ordeal toward me. Marcus Delaney's confession, security logs, and legal affidavits. Claire arrived moments later, her steps measured. She slid into the seat beside me, her presence a steadying force. We exchanged a knowing glance. Our alliance had been tested and had survived. Today, we would cement that bond in the crucible of corporate governance. The board members filed in, Lydia and Jonathan first, then Cheng, each wearing expressions that blended respect and wariness. Claire rose to speak. "Thank you all for convening at short notice," she began, voice clear. "Yesterday's events underscore the vulnerabilities we face, but they also highlight our resilience when we unite." She clicked a remote. The screen displayed a new slide. Post-crisis action plan. I added, "We have 3 critical objectives: security reinforcement, legal resolution, and cultural renewal." Lydia leaned forward. "Outline them." Claire led off. Security reinforcement means completing Cypher Guard's remediation plan within 30 days, establishing a 24/7 threat monitoring center, and mandating company-wide multi-factor authentication. Effective immediately. Jonathan added, "I'll allocate additional budget and resources. We'll double our cybersecurity staff." Claire continued, "Legal resolution requires we finalize the prosecution of Delaney and Cross, recover damages through civil suits, and partner with regulatory bodies to ensure swift action." I tapped my pen against the table. I've already commissioned our legal team and external counsel to draft a comprehensive lawsuit. We'll file within the next 5 business days and notify shareholders of our course. Cheng nodded. That should restore confidence in our governance. Claire shifted tone to the final objective, cultural renewal. We must heal our company's spirit. I propose a series of town hall meetings led by cross-departmental teams, where employees can voice concerns directly. We'll launch a leadership development program inspired by our ordeal, training in crisis management, ethical decision-making, and collaborative strategy. Lydia smiled. I can lead the initial town hall. I stood, feeling the room's momentum coalesce around our shared vision. By doing so, we reaffirm that Langley & Holt is more than a corporate entity. It's a community of professionals committed to integrity and innovation. The board voted unanimously. We had charted our path forward from the abyss. After the meeting, Claire and I walked together along the corridor. We passed glossy brochures celebrating our recent alliance, now etched in corporate history. Yet I sensed that true history would be written in the months to come, as we enacted our plan and redefined corporate resilience. In my office later, I updated my leather-bound notebook. Under today's date, I wrote, "Forged in crisis, bound by trust. Objectives set, execution begins." As dusk fell, I reviewed my schedule for the next weeks. Lawsuit filings, security audits, town halls, roadshow revamps. Each item was a step in our redemption arc. Then, I paused. On my desk lay a voicemail from Frank Mitchell. "Let's finalize the terms for our 2026 alliance. I'm free at 5 tomorrow." I allowed myself a wry smile. The world beyond our walls still needed our leadership, and we were ready to deliver it, together, stronger than ever. The following morning, I woke to the hum of a city that never sleeps, and the weight of anticipation that comes before a decisive action. I had a full day ahead. In a few hours, I'd stand before a packed auditorium of investors, unveiling our revitalized strategy. But first, I needed to lock in our legal offensive. I arrived at my office at 7:30 a.m., coffee in hand. Claire was already there, drafting the final revisions to our lawsuit against Delaney and Cross. We'd chosen our external counsel, Jordan and Pierce, a firm renowned for high-stakes litigation. The draft complaint sat open on my desk, each paragraph a testament to our resolve. "I need your signature by 9, Claire said, pen poised. "They're filing at 10. She looked exhausted but determined. I smiled. "Let's do it." I signed with a flourish and handed the document back. "Send it." She tapped her tablet. "Filed. We're officially seeking $150 million in damages, for damages, injunctions, and punitive relief." I exhaled. The lawsuit would serve as both retribution and deterrent. But our public face today was growth, not vengeance. At 9:15, I left for the Mid-Manhattan Center, where an auditorium of institutional investors assembled. My phone buzzed. Elise. Podium mic, clicker, slide deck, all set. Perfect. I stepped on stage, lights dimming behind me as the projector sparked to life. Beneath a sleek slide reading Langley & Holt, A New Era of Leadership and Innovation, I began, "Good morning. I'm Nicole Grant, CEO designate, and alongside our COO, Claire Holt Wilkins, I'm honored to present our vision for Langley & Holt's future." I clicked to the next slide, a timeline of recent events, my reinstatement, Claire's appointment, legal actions, and key partnerships. The audience leaned forward, pens poised. I moved through our 4 pillars: strategic alliances, digital transformation, security fortification, and cultural renewal. Each point was bolstered by data, testimonials, and projected returns. Claire joined me halfway, taking the clicker to dive into operational details, security metrics, governance reforms, and talent initiatives. I watched as heads nodded. Cand A followed with probing questions, but our synergy was palpable. Claire addressed compliance queries. I handled financial and growth inquiries. By the end, a standing ovation rippled through the hall. Backstage, an investment director approached. "We'll be increasing our stake by 20%, he said. "Consider it an endorsement of your leadership." I grinned. "Thank you." The rest of the day was a blur. Lunch with top-tier institutional clients, media interviews, investor calls. Each interaction reaffirmed our narrative. Crisis overcome, stronger than before. Returning to the office in the late afternoon, I found a handful of voicemails. GreenTech board chair confirming equity terms. Meridian CFO with final budgeting numbers. A note from Argonav's executive assistant confirming next week's site visit. Elise poked her head in. Darren needs you on a conference call in 5. On my way. 5 minutes later, I was in the war room again, projected screens showing live P&L updates. Darren walked me through preliminary Q1 projections, exceeding targets by 8%, thanks to our renewed contracts. Claire joined via video link. She was traveling to Geneva for a security summit. Our cybersecurity framework is gaining traction globally, she reported. We've had 4 inbound requests from major financial institutions. I smiled. That's exactly why we prioritize security. Now it drives revenue. As the conference call wrapped, a notification popped on my tablet. SEC clearance notice closed. No further action. I allowed myself a breath of relief. The last regulatory hurdle was cleared. That evening, I met Claire on the rooftop helipad, the place where our alliance had truly solidified. The city lights stretched below, stars mirrored in a river of glass. SEC? She asked. Closed, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the notice. She exhaled, leaning on the helipad railing. We did it. We did, I agreed, reaching for her hand. She squeezed it. Tomorrow, we celebrate. I nodded, looking at the horizon. Tomorrow, we begin a new chapter, one we write together. Under the open sky, 2 leaders stood victorious, bound by trust, forged in crisis, ready to shape the next era of Langley & Holt. The air smelled of possibility as I stepped into the office lobby that morning. Friday, the day we'd promised investors and employees we'd celebrate our transformed company. Balloons drifted by the reception, and staff mingled with coffee in hand, wearing expressions that ranged from cautious optimism to outright exuberance. I made my way to my office where a surprise awaited, a congratulatory card signed by every department head and executive, and a bouquet of white lilies, Claire's favorite, resting on my desk. I exhaled, the fragrance sweetening my resolve. Congratulations, Nicole, Claire said, stepping in doorway, her face radiant. She wore a tailored emerald blouse, an uncommon splash of color that matched her mood. We did it. I smiled, meeting her gaze. Together. At 10 a.m., we gathered in the main conference room, transformed for the day into a festive hall with a projector playing a highlight reel. Key moments of our journey, from the pink slip to the board takeover, Claire's rescue, and our alliance's forging. The room erupted in applause and laughter as colleagues recognized themselves in the footage. I raised my coffee cup. Here's to every late night, every bold decision, and most of all, every person in this room who believed in Langley & Holt's potential. Today, we own our narrative and our future. Claire tapped her glass. To resilience, integrity, and partnership. The rest of the morning was a blur of congratulations, media interviews broadcast across intranets, and surprise gift cards distributed to employees in recognition of their dedication. As the festivities wound down, I returned to the executive suite for a private debrief. Claire and I sat at the head table, surrounded by the company's leadership team. The tone shifted from celebration to strategy as we reviewed our 2026 roadmap, market expansions, R&D investments, digital platform rollouts, and the establishment of the Claire Nicole Leadership Fellowship, a new program to mentor future executives in crisis leadership and ethical governance. Claire paused. One more thing, she leaned forward, voice hushed. I've been thinking, we've shown strength in trials. Now let's show generosity. I propose we allocate a percentage of our recovered damages from Delaney's lawsuit to a corporate social responsibility fund, scholarships for underrepresented leaders, and grants for cybersecurity education in underserved communities. I felt a warmth beyond professional pride. I love it. Let's set it at 5%. She beamed. Agreed. The room buzzed as we sketched out allocations and partnerships. The final signature on our legal and corporate strategy lay ahead, but today was about more than numbers. It was about purpose. By late afternoon, the board convened one last time to formalize Claire's elevation to COO and my permanent CEO appointment. The minutes recorded unanimous approval, and I signed the official charter alongside Claire, our pens dancing in sync. As the document settled into the company archives, I felt a calm assurance. The journey had been dramatic, fraught with betrayal, crisis, and peril, but it had forged something enduring. Before we parted, I stood, looking at Claire and the board members. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Their laughter echoed, genuine and bright, sealing the moment. We emerged from the boardroom into the hallway, the city's pulse echoing our own, steadfast, forward-moving, alive with promise. And so our story concluded, but also began anew. 2 leaders, bound by trials, charting a course for Langley & Holt's brilliant future.